every successful person got there by going through tough times. Success is a hard-ass teacher who likes to knock you around along that journey. You know, it takes real guts to not give up and keep going. We'll hear stories about failures and how these leaders flip the script to create success. I'm John Schultz. Join me and let's discover how success is never really overnight. So welcome to the John Schultz podcast. I don't have too many real estate people on, I should say moguls on, and we do today. And I'm going to say this because I have to. He is like a brother from another mother. And I've been saying that ever since I've known him. We've known each other now for 20 plus years. It's someone that you may not see for a while, but like the minute we reconnect, it's like we never left. So I want to welcome Simon Ziff onto the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, John. I love you too.
So a little background on Simon. He started in 1989 as an analyst at Ackman Brothers and Singer, which was a real estate transaction firm. And the cool thing, which the myth of overnight success to me takes years, which most people don't realize, in 1995, he became president of the firm, which is an amazing feat. Ackman Real Estate Group is just a thriving company in the debt, mortgage, real estate business. It's done over $100 billion in debt under his leadership. I said $100 billion, and is still going. And I want to welcome you on. And I think we're going to have a lot of great discussions, not only about you and your journey, but, in a timely space of where real estate really is right now and what we've all been feeling. But we're going to start out about you. So, young little Simon, how would you describe yourself growing up? And then question two, you can go right into it. How would your parents describe you growing up?
Wow. How would my parents describe me? I don't know that my parents have ever described me before. It's a good question. I would say I was a focused kid, whether it was race cars, those little AFX race cars, or electric football, or golf. I was always all in with whatever my hobby was. And I probably took that from my mother. I took a lot of hobbies from my mother. She was a golfer, a gardener. I'm an avid gardener today. And I guess it's probably always all in. My bedroom was organized. My books were organized, and because they kind of just let me be. My parents just let me be. They let me leave in the morning on my bike, go to the golf course and play 9, 18, 27 holes, go hunt for balls for 2 hours. They let me be. And I guess as a third kid growing up in the 70s, we're in a small town in rural Pennsylvania, everything was pretty safe there. So I think it worked out that it probably helped me be who I am today, to just let me be and grow up the way I did in a very comfortable environment.
And I can apply that because, and we're going to talk about business, but like a culture usually emanates from a lot of the character traits, whoever, I wouldn't say leading, but who's involved in, it could be a division of a company. It could be the whole company. And, everyone that I know knows you, feels so comfortable asking you questions, or if they don't understand something, addressing it with you because you have that way, that let it be way. So like, obviously your parents did an amazing job, and, and that's why I like going back, because you see all the traits that we gain from, childhood. A lot of them run through our business life and our personal life all the way till, when we're not here anymore. So that's good. Would you consider them?
I would say the other thing that happened in childhood that may have impacted my life and career, I think there were a couple things. One was golfing as a kid, as a sixth grader and eighth grader, and playing with adults and getting very comfortable communicating with adults. Like I said, my parents would drop me off at the golf course, and I would be there for 6 hours, 7 hours practicing. And I think that communication with a lot of people at a young age was useful. And then I'd say the second thing was having leadership roles as a kid early probably impacted the rest of my life, whether it was student council president or I was on a state student council board where I traveled throughout the state at various times. And these things just kind of just happened, but one leadership position led to another leadership position, led to president of my fraternity and whatever it was. So I do think that those leadership roles early were a great boost for me.
100%. What would you say? Because you had leadership roles when you were young, right? And most people don't realize what goes into that responsibility, right? It's way more than you ever would think would be once you step in. What were some of the challenges? And then maybe I love that you did the golf thing, right? Because even today, I meet people I never would. It's like being with if you love golf, it's being around people that, are like-minded when it comes to it. What were some of your mentors that you think actually got you through those leadership sort of lessons as a younger person that kept you doing it? Because it would have been very easy to just say, you know what, this is not for me, especially as a young person, because you didn't really need to do it.
That's a great question, too. I've been asked a lot who my mentors were. And I would say that I was lucky that the kids I played golf with, who were a few years older, were just amazing, nice people. And they're still deeply embedded in me. If you look around my office, it's decorated with items from my high school and my hometown. And I'm deeply rooted in my high school. This last weekend, I drove out to Pennsylvania for a couple of days by myself to run into people. Of course, I visited the cemetery. My parents both passed away this year. My sister passed away this year. So we had a tough year, but it was good to go back and be part of my childhood. Play Phillipsburg Country Club with one of my high school friends, and I remember playing golf with people that were 5, 6 years older than I was, and they were just really good people, and they were nice to me, and they were respectable. They were respectable to their parents and the community. And I'll tell you one thing that was a little bit different for me growing up. I was practically the only Jewish person within a pretty big distance. And in my class, in my high school class, there was just my cousin and I. And so I felt that I had a bigger responsibility to represent our people and make sure that our people were respected and liked. I kind of always felt that was part of me. And so I took that seriously, that when I was in school and the topic came up, or I was on the golf course, that if the topic came up, people would look at me, and I had to be a great kid so that people would not dislike our people.
That's interesting. And I'm so sorry about obviously having to go through what you went through with your family, because right now I'm actually going to ask you more about your family. And I know you have deep roots. And, when we grow up around what our parents are doing, it's almost like it's the only thing we know. And you went from a small town to a big city, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But your family was ingrained in retail and clothing and apparel and stores and all sorts of, commerce in that respect. And, tell me about that. And then tell me what made you not want to do that? Because again, because you were in that small town, right? It takes a mindset, which of learning and saying, like, what else is out there to actually move from what's comfortable, right? And, to me, the most, I think, impediment to anything, it's the two C words. It's comfort and then you have to have courage, right? Like those two go hand in hand. So how did you evolve out of the retail business into like getting into real estate and your first job in real estate?
I think that's where college really created great value for me. I went to the college that was 24 miles away, State College, Pennsylvania, where Penn State is. I had two older sisters that went to Penn State. My dad went to Penn State. My uncles, cousins went to Penn State. It was pretty much a done deal for me. And my parents had a clothing store on College Avenue, so I was able to see them every day, at least through my freshman year before they lost their lease. It was a great time at Penn State too. We won two national championships in '82 and '86. I joined a wonderful fraternity, and I studied finance. So my junior year, I took my first real estate course, and I loved finance, but this was eye-opening. I had a professor named Ken Lusht, and Ken just taught. He was one of the great real estate professors at the time, Ken Lusht and Austin Jaffe at Penn State, and he just got me excited. And that's when it hit me. Real estate was better than finance for me, because finance, I'd have to go to New York. I'm never going to New York. That's not for this kid. But in real estate finance, I could go to Harrisburg or Scranton or any of the other big cities, Wilkes-Barre, and be in real estate, because every city has real estate. So that was one of the light bulbs that went off for me, and I'm being half sarcastic in terms of those cities, but I could go anywhere. And I would say my trajectory up until that point was, if I could get the Northwestern Mutual insurance territory for Central PA, that might be great when I graduate college. That might be a great territory for me, because maybe that guy's ready to give it up when I graduate college, and I can own that for the rest of my career. But again, I was obsessive once I found real estate, reading every book I could, and there were very few jobs coming out of schools like Penn State in '87. We had the stock market crash. I think I got one of the best jobs you could get in real estate as an analyst at Mass Mutual in Springfield, Mass. Now today I would ask any of the kids that take our summer class, how many of you would move to Springfield after you graduate for a job? And the answer is pretty much nobody would. But back then you did what you had to do. So I didn't mind moving to Springfield, another city where I didn't know anybody, not a great city, not one that you aspire to go to, but I had a great experience there working at Mass Mutual. They were really good people, and I learned a lot. And so I went up to Mass Mutual for a year to be a real estate analyst when I graduated.
All right. So what was the transition from Springfield then to New York? Because it doesn't sort of fit what I'm hearing about why you picked real estate and not finance. It was to not go to New York. So how did that change?
Yeah, at Mass Mutual, after a year, they send you to another city, and they chose to send me to Chicago. It wasn't on top of my list. They made the decision to send someone else to Washington, which was on top of my list. I think they made the right decision, because she's still there 36 years later. And I applied to NYU. They had these new Masters in Real Estate programs that started in 1988. I saw an article in the New York Times, or an ad, and I applied, and I got accepted to NYU. And I said, all right, I'm going to go get a master's in real estate. Part of that was a little of an insecurity of just having an undergraduate degree from Penn State at the time, and seeing how competitive the world was. I thought that the NYU Masters would bolster my resume and make me more valuable over time.
So then you do that, and then you're, Ackman-Ziff sort of.
Well, there's a little bit before that. So I came to New York, and I knew one person, and we decided to live together. I knew him from college. He was in a cult at the time, So it was a little odd to transition to New York and then learn about cults. And he was a good kid, but he got pulled into this cult. And so, but slowly on my own, I got to meet other people through the NYU Master's Program, which is called SHAC today, a program that became very valuable to me and our firm over the last 35 years. And I can get into that in a little bit because many of my colleagues we hired from that program. But it was a transition, John, for sure. There were kids from Ivy League schools. I hadn't met any before. There were kids working at Goldman Sachs, working on Wall Street, and here I was coming from rural Pennsylvania and Springfield, and I didn't even have many colleagues from Penn State that were moving to New York at the time. So it was an interesting transition, but I embraced it. I was young and single and studying real estate, and New York had a lot to offer a young single person studying real estate.
So after that, you're here, right? You don't know anyone. How were you able to secure this first job, right, at Ackman?
So there were a couple of things. One, I was meeting people through getting involved with some not-for-profits, and I think that proves to be a good tool in the toolbox for anyone moving to a new city. Is find some common interests with others and get involved with young, in this case, young real estate groups. I got to Ackman through a New York Times ad. Larry Ackman was looking for an analyst, and I was interviewing everywhere I could when I was at NYU full time, so that I could get to work as quickly as possible. And that was my entry to I met Larry Ackman through this ad. We interviewed. I still have a letter that shows the notes he took after the interview or during the interview. And I went to work for Larry at Ackman Brothers and Singer, which was really one of the 2 or 3 premier firms in real estate finance at the time. It was at the, well, we're 98 years, and that was 36 years ago. So it had already been around 62 years when I joined. And it was 2 cousins, Larry Ackman and his cousin Andy Singer. And the generation before was Larry Ackman's father and his uncle. And Larry Ackman had a son in the business, and Andy Singer would have a son come into the business over those years that I was there.
So I have another question. So you work with Bill Ackman, who actually I got a chance to meet and interview for an organization I'm involved with. And I know during that interview, he talked lots about his passion for real estate, right? I know he's more in the private equity of companies now, and also real estate, but public markets. So what was it like to work with Bill?
Well, when I started the firm, Bill and I were both young single guys in New York. So I got to know him socially, and he was always a force of nature. It was pretty obvious that this guy was going to do something special. And when Ackman and Singer split, I would also say he was one of the reasons why I wanted to go with Larry Ackman, among others. But you could see Bill's trajectory from the minute you met him was always high. The relationships he would build. And when he was in our business as a mortgage broker, he was pretty extraordinary. He was getting deals done at a young age. He looked like he was 40 when he was 23. So that helped. He was tall, good looking, and had white hair early on. So he was special, and it's not surprising to me the success that Bill's had and will continue to have.
Yeah, he tells it like it is. And, I thought, he was very insightful with his comments, and he doesn't mix words. And I like when you know what you're getting. And that's how I felt about him as I was interviewing him and talking to him and got to know him a little bit during that time. But, obviously he still has his public market real estate thing going on. So you never leave your roots, just like you never have. And I don't think I ever will either. So Again,
At at uh, at Larry Ackman's 80th, I told the story that I pulled Bill Ackman into an office and I said, Bill, this place isn't big enough for the both of us. You're going to have to go back to business school and find something else to do. And a few people came up to me afterwards and said, wow, is that true? I said, of course that's not true.
exactly.
It was a funny story to tell.
I love it. So, preeminent firm, been around a long time. You get there as an analyst through an ad, which I love, right? You said, all these nonprofits you join. I always say, if you want gifts, give, right? Like if you go into a community to help, you usually meet people you don't realize, which are those angels, right? That either tap you on the shoulder to push you forward, or, somehow you meet someone you never thought you would because you were trying to help someone else. So I think that is a major lesson. But now you're at a firm that's the real deal. You were there for a while. Obviously, in 1995, you took over as president, which is amazing. So what were some of the challenges for you to get to that place? And then once you did that, it more or less is going to now move into a new generation of thought. How did that go with Ackman and team and, the whole dynamic of a major change like that? Because you're the newest person in a, generations of what was.
Well, I'll go back to how we got there. My friends from NYU used to remind me that I was obsessive over building databases in the late 80s and early 90s when I was at the firm. And I was building these databases to go after new business. And there wasn't a lot of liquidity in the market when I started. And then Wall Street kicked in with CMBS markets. And I went all in exporting this New York capital technology around the country, going to conferences with my backpack and going from booth to booth and explaining that we can finance your shopping center on a non-recourse basis now with a 10-year term and a 30-year amortization. And it's something that they hadn't seen before. So a theme to the whole career, even today, is an obsession over unique capital and what's next in capital. And this was a time when people in the intermediary space were leaving the intermediary space because it was too hard. But I was at a premier firm that was getting incoming calls. So we were doing pretty well when it was a tough time in the market and people were leaving. So that created an opportunity for me to rise. Now, I didn't realize I was rising. So when the firm split, when Ackman and Singer split, I said I'm going to be looking for a new job. I didn't realize that I would get 2 offers that day that they didn't even make sense to me. But I got them, and I went with Ackman for a variety of reasons. And that was the beginning of the new partnership.
It's amazing. I mean, because you were so young and you took a leadership role. It was a split up, but it's been around a long time. When you go to firms that were, it's always like, yeah, we always do it this way. This is how it's always been done. I'm always into like what's new. Like you're saying, unique capital. For me, it's like where are we going and how am I going to get in the middle of it? So what strategies have you employed to maintain the reputation of something great with something new in a business, like you said, like CMBS? It's crazy. It's like CMBS was really just starting and there was so many other forms of capital. How did you create a culture that kept both aspects together, but also thrived?
Well, there's a lot to that one. And I want to step back and say that Larry Ackman said to me the day he hired me, good business ethics is good business. I remember where he was sitting. I remember the table. I remember the check he showed me that he wrote to Harvard Business School. And I think that among many things that Larry did great, he pounded that into my head and to others who would join the firm over the years. So you start with good business ethics is good business. And John, I don't need to tell you how many times a week we encounter not good business ethics or different shades of business ethics that have been the way things are done, but you can question the way things are done in so many instances, right? You know what I'm talking about. So what are some of the things that led to our success? I think that's your question. We were always told the client comes first, right? Any business, you're told client comes first. So that's true, but underlying that is your team has to be functioning great for a client to have a good outcome. So it's really about team first, picking the right team members, player development of those team members, and execution. And it may sound like a football game, but I truly believe there are a lot of similarities to my sport, college football, and what we do for a living, with the biggest emphasis on player development and developing not only that ethics ethos, but developing the passion for finding money and focusing. Don't take on more deals than you can be great at. If you can be great at 10 deals, you can work on 10 deals. But if you can only be great at 2 at a time, you should only work on 2 deals. So your capacity is as many transactions as you can be great at. And that means every nuance, every detail until it's closed. That's how your client wins. So in building that team, we recruited from NYU Shack, and I have colleagues in this office that I know 36 years. One who was at the original firm, left, had his own firm, came back. My partner David Hart, and then Russell Schildkraut, Patrick Hanlon, Brian Corcoran, Jason Crane. A lot of these colleagues came out of the Shack program and are still with us today. And I hope they're with us if you're watching this video in 15 years. That would be great. And so we had a playbook. We liked a certain type, a technical associate that was a few years older, a little more mature, chip on their shoulder, felt they might have some loyalty. And those people are still with us. And they hired the next generation and the next generation. So that was one, team. I think team was really, really the number one thing for our success.
Plus, what I think so interesting, like you have such a deep sense of roots because everything you've been involved with, you still are, from Penn State to Shack. So like being around that, like I feel we all feed off everyone's energy all day long and we gravitate towards what's our true inner self. We're never the same, right? We all have our own character traits and, you know, our own special, unique purpose for the world. But, you know, the root system, the which is loyalty in itself. I mean, I've felt that about you ever since I've known you. So like you saying that, like actually was a great concrete version for me to fully understand. Like, because I always wondered, like CBR, all these large firms, you know, as things evolved, there's really less, you know, yous out there. There just is. I mean, they're there, but they're not prominent, right? Like what I love about real estate, it's so big. Like, and I tell everyone this, like you could find your niche anywhere. You could go back to Allentown and find your niche. I actually had Borco on, who, you know, is Bethlehem based. And like I love the fact that real estate is just such a large industry. So the culture formed, right? Okay. And, you know, you're being you, but what were some of the challenges knowing what I said with these large behemoths, keeping people, but also thriving and getting the clients to actually, you know, stay with you over the years? Because, you know, it could easily go away.
Yeah, I think again, it comes down to if you're obsessed with finding money, the new money, the hot capital, whatever it is, and you're building relationships with that new money, maintaining relationships with the old money, treating everybody with respect, not wasting their time when you show them a deal. Don't show them deals they can't do or shouldn't be competitive. There's a list of 100 things. We have a playbook. We have a manual. We're updating it every 3 months with the nuances that we learn from the business. So it's that. It's our ability to deal with challenging people on every side of the transaction. And it started for me with Larry Ackman, who was a brilliant, good person. It wasn't easy. Those that knew him knew he wasn't easy. But we didn't have, in all our years together, we didn't have many spats. So we knew how to navigate each other and each other's style. And that carried through with other people in the firm. We have some really successful people here. Along with successful people are strong minds and people that do things the way they want to do them. And they're here a long time. So this focus on spending a lot of time with people and working with them to navigate their issues and concerns is a big part of my personal success. Because as you know, we've seen people come and go in our business and move around. And you mentioned the big firms too. I guess I should address the big firms. We've had almost every opportunity you could have to be part of a bigger firm. I could argue that my net worth might be double today had we transacted with one of those bigger firms, particularly one of the transactions around 2007. And we didn't do it. And we didn't do it again in 10. We didn't do it again in 2 times since then. And in spite of the fact that, again, my net worth might be a third or half of what it could have been, I have zero regrets because I'm surrounded by 36 years, 26 years, 25 years. And you and I know you can't keep it together. When you join a big firm, all that goes away. The goodwill that I have if I do something stupid is gone. There's a new board, there's a new boss. They don't care. But if I make a mistake here, I go sit down with my partners and I say, I messed this up. What are we going to do? Well, we'll figure it out, Simon. Or vice versa. If they make a mistake and they come in to see me, the goodwill is there. All right, we'll figure it out. This is what we have to do. So I am grateful for having this kind of time with so many people. And for young people, I tell them, you don't want to switch so fast because the value of having spent 2 years with all those people and learning their system and them getting to know you and you building up goodwill with them and they building, and I'm not sure how to say it, and the goodwill that they've built up with you is hugely valuable to you because there will be situations and mistakes. If you're just new people getting together, you can't put a value on the years of working together.
Well, and that's one of your core components. So I get it. I mean, why would you want to lose the most important thing that means anything to you, right? So, and the fact that money will come anyway if you do the right thing, right? But I give you kudos for that because at the end of the day, you care, and that's why you are successful because you care so much more about the people around you than you honestly do about yourself. So good for you, and it's carried up until today. And today's an interesting time, between COVID, interest rate hikes, our business, we're in this next cycle, right? So, recently we're seeing the 10-year go down. We're seeing sort of some light at the end of a long tunnel, actually, this is my third cycle. This has been an interesting one. This wasn't something that happened all at once and then you felt it and then you started grinding, like you said, the word, grinding through it to have it fixed. This has been like death by 1,000 cuts, first COVID, then interest rates going up faster than we've ever seen in history. So how are you seeing the next few years? How did that impact your people, right? Because capital markets, which is all you are. I mean, some firms do leasing, they do other things that actually, they do management, they do, receiver, they do things that actually generate other revenue other than just debt. How'd that go? And where do you see this going over the next couple of years?
It's been tough, but it's been exciting for us too. So we diversified nationally. 90% of our business is around the country. Last year, if you combined Arizona and Texas, it was our number one state for financings. Most people wouldn't know that or believe that. We've diversified in asset classes over the years. We've made pushes into energy. We've made pushes into build-to-rent communities, land and home builders. And, Porter teaches us, if you do exactly what everybody else does, your fees get squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. But if you have something that's a little bit special, either asset classes, more complicated deals, higher up in the capital stack, you have an equity practice that's super important to our firm, joint venture equity practice. We've had it for 25 years. If you have these areas, you can maybe make better fees and maybe add more value. When 5 firms go pitch a multifamily deal, no one's making any money when somebody wins that. They think they won something, but I'm not sure they won something other than some press when they close the deal. They get grinded down to really.
Well, it's like you said, niche versus commodity, right? And if you're going to stay on your own path, you have to, be different. But where do you think we're going?
John, the other thing that's really working well is this obsession over player development. When I walk through the office and I go in each office and I go meet with each person, everyone is primed. They're making the leaps. So we have a whole group of those late 20s to early 40s that are ready, and they're getting ready, and we're doing everything we can to put them in a position. They're getting on planes, and they're going to Chicago, and they're going to San Francisco, and they're going to Atlanta and other cities. We're spending a ton of time in South Florida, throwing events everywhere. And we're making progress. The pitch of your capital advisor should be in New York, not locally, because what's more important it's not important how often they can see your property. What's important is how close they are to the guy that's going to say, your deal is approved for $80 million or not. How many times your advisor sees that person and sees the head of credit. If it's once a year, good luck with that conversation. And you can be a national firm and be in a local office, but if it's just you on the deal and you're not using your New York team, then what's the benefit to the client? So our approach is, let's get out there. Let's go all over the country. Let's show owners that our access to capital. Think about it, John. A deal over $100 million today requiring debt or equity. If you go to the market, 50 lenders, 200 equity investors, the percentage of those capital sources coming out of New York is very high. It's not to say that Bank of the Ozarks isn't one of the most important relationships we have, and they're not in New York, for sure, and other insurance companies around the country. But as a whole, for most deals, and Wall Street, of course, the CMBS market is absolutely critical to the valuations of real estate in this country the last 30 years and today. There's liquidity in the CMBS markets, super important. But you have to know, when is it a Morgan Stanley deal? When is it a Barclays deal? When is it a 3650 deal? and and 8 or 10 other really important capital
And
sources.
what you're really saying, which, is what you've been amazing at your whole career, is, you know, relationships really do make your success, because like you, then New York wouldn't matter. Like everyone thinks this is a commodity type business, but it's the opposite, because you got to trust who you're actually sponsoring, and like getting to know people and knowing that you have always been the upstanding person you are, and always giving the facts either way. I totally agree. I mean, I feel you can't survive any other way. So if you were going to tell some of the younger professionals, which I know you get very involved with, entering real estate during times of economic uncertainty, which is where we are, right? Like I always felt this is when you enter, because everyone's on an equal playing field now. You can't say, well, we did it that way. Okay, but how'd that turn out, right? So, like to me, whenever we did anything of change, when I was a broker to even, what we're doing now, it's always during these times we make our move. So what would you suggest to the younger people coming in?
I don't think it, I mean, for young people today, it's most important that they're learning. That's all you need to do the first few years. And sure, if you can build relationships, great, but you don't have to build any relationships other than with your peers and your bosses your first few years. So find a spot where you can learn the most. We spend a ton of time with young people through our AZ Educate program. We train about almost 100 kids a year, and we're obsessed over young talent. But that's the message we give them: learn, stay straight, don't bend the rules. And if you have a question, and if you're put in an ethical dilemma, make sure you have mentors to reach out to and ask them, hey, what should I do? My boss asked me to change a number, but I don't think I should. Right? Ask a mentor. What are you supposed to do? Because it's above your pay grade as an analyst or an associate when some of these issues that present themselves.
So funny. I always say to younger people, like, it's the only time in your life you're expected to know nothing and just, grind it out and learn from each experience. And I also say, like, the first 10 years of your career is finding out what you don't want to be, not what you want to be. It takes the pressure off, and that's how it all is. And, to this day, we're still trying to figure it out. So as a last question, because I'm interested in hearing this about you, because I ask it a lot, both personally and on this podcast. So if you weren't in real estate, right, what other career path do you think you would have pursued?
Well, in 1983, when I graduated high school, I was thinking pretty seriously about tech. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal that Drexel University was going to be the first school that required a computer for every student. I went to go visit Drexel to see what that was about. There was no way I wasn't going to Penn State. But I think if I gone into in my yearbook for my ambition, I said go to Silicon Valley and win a club championship. Important combo. I didn't win a club championship in high school. Had I gone into tech in 1983, you might be using Zoogle today. Maybe you'd be riding around town in Zuber. I think what could have happened had I gone into tech. That's on one side. On the other side, I've got a bunch of things that are hovering in terms of hobbies and interests in life. I had a passion for genealogy, which is dormant right now, but there is an Ackman-Ziff Jewish Genealogy Institute on 16th Street, which will become more of an activity for me at some point. I am enjoying being an artist in my yard. Not a very good one, but I was up at 6:15 this morning pruning one of my trees and deciding whether to keep it at 14 feet or make it 5.5 feet. And I must have stared at that tree for 15 minutes deciding. I didn't make a decision yet. So landscaping, genealogy are certainly two, and technology. I'm building a few websites right now. In fact, we're in the final testing. They're apps. It got pretty inexpensive to build apps. I own a bunch of domains, so I'll have a couple new domains and new apps probably within a week. They're done. We're just testing them. So if you want to keep a list of people that you want to fix up, I've got the app for that. Or if you want to keep a list of friends who are hiring or are looking for work, I've got the app for that now too. It's simple. It's just a list. But where do you keep those lists today?
No, listen, any good app that ever came about, including in our industry, like, the leasing apps, was off a spreadsheet into something that made it easier to track and follow up with and be reminded by. And, spreadsheets are dead documents. Smartsheet actually was created, which, makes that experience better. But I'm totally cool with all that stuff. And what's interesting is, I'm the same way. That's why I have a podcast. Like, you can do your other things. It doesn't have to be about money, but it makes you happy, and it makes everything else in your life better. And that's what hobbies are, and hobbies can turn into lots of things after that. But I'm happy you're happy with your trees, and hopefully you'll make that decision by, the next week or so, because obviously, we want to make sure that tree thrives. But I want to thank you for being here. You're a good man. You have a great company. You've helped so many people. Hopefully this will help even more. And again, thanks. Hi, John Schultz here. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. Would really appreciate it if you would like, comment, subscribe, and share with your friends. Looking forward to being with you soon.